This is The Sixpenny Scarecrow by Coops.
There are villages in England that still hold to their old ways, places where the fog lingers longer than it should, and the locals speak softly when the wind carries certain names. Sixpenny Handley is one of them. Every autumn, they build a scarecrow to guard the harvest and burn away the year's bad luck. But this year, the straw man doesn't sleep. And when the villagers' whispered grudges begin to take shape, Nurse Eleanor Vance learns that not all traditions die quietly. Some remember, some wait, and some, once wound, never truly rest.
The Sixpenny Scarecrow, Chapter 1, Autumn Arrival. The village of Sixpenny Handley was, by all accounts, excessively quaint. As Eleanor Vance coaxed her battered Ford Fiesta past a sign cheerfully announcing the annual pumpkin fete and bonfire night, she decided it was less quaint and more aggressively idyllic, every cottage neat under its thatch, every window box running over with late geraniums, the air heavy with wood smoke, and the warm, yeasty breath of fresh bread. Eleanor, 28, a nurse who had traded the fluorescent rush of a London trauma ward for the quieter anonymity of a Dorset GP surgery, found the display faintly suspicious. In London, people were too busy to be this cheerful. Here, the cheer felt curated. She parked behind the village's lone pub, the Handley Arms, where the surgery sat tucked into a small stone building. Halloween had brought a theatrical fog rolling off the ancient fields, threading lanes and hedges as if it knew its cue. Inside, Dr. Alistair Finch was buoyed by harvest spirit, pinning up a homemade poster for a pumpkin pie contest. "Ah, Eleanor, splendid! Found the cottage all right?" "The air, the peace, the community spirit," he boomed, dusting flour from his tweed as if he'd arm-wrestled a bakery. "It's fine, Doctor," she said, peeling off her gloves. "But I passed 3 separate packs of children dressed as miniature plague doctors. Is that standard?" Finch's chuckle rumbled. "Sixpenny tradition. We take our history seriously, and tonight you'll see the most serious of all, the debut of Old Man Barley." He gestured toward the crossroads, visible through the window. Eleanor stepped closer and stopped. The square's focal point wasn't the market cross or the pub, but a scarecrow, though scarecrow seemed too small a word. Nearly 10 feet high, it was built over a heavy wooden armature, its body packed tight with stubble and straw that smelled of dry earth. The head was a carved pumpkin, its grimaced mouth and fierce candle-lit stare giving it a malevolent, unblinking glare. Severe, old-fashioned farm clothes, tattered coat, weighty boots hung from straw limbs, it looked less like decoration than sentinel, or idol. "That's Old Man Barley?" A thread of unease slipped into her voice. "Indeed. First full build in decades," Finch said, proud as a showman. "He absorbs the lust of the autumn fears and guards the harvest's turn. We leave him at the crossroads till midnight, then burn him on the great bonfire. Old Elder McRae insisted. Says the village needs a bit of resetting." "Resetting?" "Oh, the usual. Too much gossip, too many petty feuds." Finch waved it off. "McRae believes the old ways purge the bad blood. Ancient business older than records." Eleanor, who preferred clinical fact to folk charm, filed it as elaborate overkill and set to work. The day filled with pre-holiday aches, coughs, scrapes, nothing a steady nurse couldn't settle. By late afternoon, as the light thinned into evening gloom, the waiting room changed temperature. People arrived less festive, more frayed. First came Mrs. Henderson from the sweet shop, wincing over a badly sprained ankle. "I don't know how I did it, Doctor. Just walking across the square and, whoosh, my foot turned over." "Easy." Eleanor examined the swelling. "A nasty sprain. You were simply walking?" Under the bright surgery light, Mrs. Henderson paled. "Well, I crossed in front of Old Man Barley. And I thought, oh, it's awful, I thought, how I wished that wretched Mr. Davies would break his leg so he couldn't beat me in the fudge contest again." Her hand flew to her mouth. "It's terrible. Must be the strain." Eleanor glanced at Finch. He offered a genial shrug. Uneven paving, silly superstition. 30 minutes later, Mr. Graves, the butcher, stumbled in with a deep forearm cut. "Kitchen accident?" Eleanor asked, prepping stitches. "No, the shop's shut. I was carrying sausages for the bonfire. I passed the Scarecrow and I swear I heard it sigh. Then my arm jerked. Knife in hand. Nearly bled out in the square. Were you thinking anything unusual?" Eleanor kept her tone level. Graves swallowed. Debt, the bank, losing the shop, and the knife it went for my ledger arm, the one I write the accounts with. Eleanor drew the wound together with neat, unhurried stitches, but her skepticism had frayed. 2 odd accidents, both immediately after crossing the Scarecrow, both mirroring the person's specific fear. While Finch arranged transport for Mrs. Henderson, Eleanor pulled on her thick coat and stepped into the fog. At the crossroads, Old Man Barley's pumpkin glare cut through the murk. 2 teenagers, Liam and Chloe, loitered at its base. Liam, already on the vandal list, flicked a small firecracker toward the straw leg. "Liam, stop that now," Eleanor called, sharp as a clap. He startled, dropped the fuse, and shot her a look of pure teenage scorn. "Buzzkill Londoner," he muttered, bending to snatch it up. A flicker only that made Eleanor freeze. The Scarecrow's giant button eye seemed to tighten focus on the boy. The figure didn't move, yet the air around it grew charged, like the breath before a storm finds its ground. Liam clawed at his throat. No cough, no food, only a silent, terrible gasp. His face blued. He staggered backward, hands locked at his neck. Chloe screamed. "He's choking! He's always been scared of choking!" Eleanor was already there. Airway blocked not by an object, not by tongue, but by panic hardening his own muscles, a fear made physical. She hauled him into position, 2 precise thrusts on the second. His lungs seized, then heaved, air tore in with a raw, shuddering sob. He collapsed, shaking. 3 incidents, 3 private terrors, triggered the instant they crossed the Scarecrow. Eleanor lifted her gaze. Inside the pumpkin head, candlelight guttered. Across the carved face, the enormous stitched mouth seemed to widen into a silent, triumphant grin. This wasn't quaint folklore, it was a weapon, and it was active. And Eleanor had crossed its path too. Her fear wasn't money or choking. It was making a fatal mistake on the job, failing to save a life. The fear that had sent her fleeing London after the case she nearly lost. The fear she barely admitted to herself. She turned for the surgery, intent on finding Elder McRae and demanding the Scarecrow be destroyed when a strange lightness slid through her mind. She glanced at her keys, gone, patted her pocket empty. She stopped. The trained pathways of thought, the tidy drawers of procedure and recall went slick. She couldn't place where she'd parked, where she lived, what step came next. For a heartbeat, her professional self simply blanked. Old Man Barley had chosen her secret terror, losing her critical faculties, and pressed a finger to it. The game had begun. The Sixpenny Scarecrow, Chapter 2. Bad Luck's Beginning. The moment of total cognitive blankness lasted only seconds, but it terrified Eleanor more than any spectral encounter could. Her hands, which had only minutes before cleared a blocked airway with practiced precision, now trembled uncontrollably. The fear wasn't death, it was incompetence, the paralysis of a trained professional losing her edge. She forced herself to breathe the way she'd taught countless patients. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Anchor to the present. I am Eleanor Vance. I am a nurse. The time is 6:45 p.m. I am in Sixpenny Handley, and an inanimate object is manifesting human fears. Her focus returned, but so did the nausea. The Scarecrow hadn't simply triggered accidents. It had chosen its victims, striking with surgical precision at their deepest anxieties. It was intelligent, and it knew her now. Eleanor didn't return to the surgery, too exposed. Instead, she turned toward the old parish church. The fog was thick around its lich gate, the lamps little more than pale halos. She slipped through the gate and found sanctuary in the cold, damp air of the vestry. Inside, she discovered what she needed, a cluttered table covered with parish records and handwritten histories, left open for the annual Halloween display. She lit a stub of candle, scanning pages with the efficient curiosity of a clinician searching for patterns, not poetry. A 1953 diary entry caught her eye, written in the tight, uneven script of a former Elder McRae. The fear is gone, but the grudges remain. The youth today have no respect for the purging fire. I pray the Lord forgive us for burying him instead of burning him, as the old instructions decreed. Buried him? Eleanor's stomach tightened. The scarecrow wasn't meant to be permanent, it was supposed to be burned every year. Further down, she found an older parchment, 17th century at least, the ink brown and fragile. It described the truce of the threshing, a harvest rite in which a figure made from the last straw of the season was sacrificed to absorb the spiritual residue of the community, all the envy, malice, and resentment people buried to stay civil. At midnight, the effigy would be burned, releasing those poisons harmlessly into the smoke. But the note from 1953 changed everything. They hadn't burned it, they'd buried it. The charm inside the binding knot had continued to absorb the village's grudges for 70 years, fermenting them into something far more dangerous. Old Man Barley wasn't a guardian, he was a pressure vessel. The longer he stood, the more toxic he became. A sudden shout from outside broke the stillness. Eleanor snatched the candle and ran. The church doors banged open as she stepped into the fog-drenched square. A crowd had gathered. The air shimmered with the same metallic taste she'd noticed before, like lightning without light. At the base of the market cross, Mr. Davies, the baker, was crouched over a shattered wooden clock, tears streaking his flower-pale face. "My recipes," he wailed. "All ruined, gone." The ground was littered with soaked, torn slips of paper, handwritten recipe cards, destroyed beyond saving. Eleanor dropped to her knees beside him. "What happened?" "The wind," he stammered. "But it wasn't wind. I crossed the square and thought, curse that old Henderson woman, her sweet cakes only win because she cheats, and then my notes were torn straight out of my coat." Another wish, another fear, another manifestation. Mrs. Henderson had wished for his ruin, and he for hers. The scarecrow had simply honoured both. Eleanor's pulse raced. The pattern was absolute. Grudge plus proximity equals outcome. The binding knot was accelerating. She turned her gaze to the crossroads. Old Man Barley towered against the fog, his pumpkin head glowing with a fierce inner light. For the first time, she saw it clearly, a faint golden shimmer deep in his chest where the straw was packed densest. The charm was visible now, as if aware she'd found its secret. Only one man could confirm the truth, Elder McRae. She ran through the crooked back lanes toward his cottage, the sound of the irregular bell still echoing through the mist. McRae's cottage sat apart from the village, a hunchbacked sprawl of old timber and lamplight. Inside, the elder sat hunched at his desk, whispering into a heavy, leather-bound tome. "Elder McRae," Eleanor gasped, bursting through the door. "You have to stop the ritual. The scarecrow is attacking people." The old man turned slowly, his eyes wild but lucid. "No, not attacking, Nurse Vance. Cleansing. But it's gone wrong. It's too full. The energy is overpressurized." He slammed the book shut with shaking hands. "I told them the ritual must be exact. The placing means nothing without the chant, without the burning. The charm is reacting to the strength of the hate." He shoved the book toward her, his gnarled finger landing on a section written in faded red ink. There the decommissioning, the old instructions. Eleanor bent over the brittle page. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. The heart of barley shall be cut, and the binding knot removed. To sever its power, the knot must be broken by a hand clean of grievance and submerged in salt water at the time of the great bell's final chime. Her heart sank. "The sea's miles away." McRae shook his head. Not the sea. The spring, beneath the Handley arms. They use it for brewing. Midnight. Nurse, that's the final chime. We must get to the pub before they light the fire. If they burn him full of hate, they'll unleash it. He took her arm, eyes pleading. I can't touch the knot. I carry too many grudges. You're the outsider, the clean hand. You must do this. Eleanor felt the weight of the moment, her London failure, her shaken confidence, her trembling hands, all of it compressing into one choice. Outside, the fog shuddered as the bell changed tone, no longer a call to worship, but an alarm. It knows, McCrae whispered, voice thin with fear. It knows we mean to destroy it. Eleanor grabbed the book and bolted. She had less than 3 hours until midnight, and a village full of simmering hatred marching toward the bonfire. The Sixpenny Scarecrow, Chapter 3. Folklore and Fear. Eleanor burst out of Elder McCrae's cottage, clutching the heavy, leather-bound book of local customs tight to her chest. The church bell above the green was tolling in frantic, uneven bursts, not the ceremonial rhythm of celebration, but the wild alarm of something calling the village together. The fog swirled in sympathy, restless and aware. She checked her watch. 8:30. Midnight, the time of the great bell's final chime, was more than 3 hours away. But if the villagers lit the bonfire early, believing it was part of the tradition, the charm's power would detonate. She had to act before Old Man Barley touched flame. The air grew thicker as she ran. The fog wasn't drifting now. It was moving, curling around the cobbles in purposeful spirals, as if stirred by invisible hands. The smell of peat and wood smoke was laced with something sharper, a metallic tang that raised the hairs on her arms. When she reached the square, chaos had already begun. The bonfire, a towering structure of logs, brushwood and straw, was smouldering at its base. Villagers crowded around, drawn by the bell, their voices rising in confusion and quarrel. The Scarecrow stood at the centre like a dark idol, its pumpkin head gleaming orange against the smoke, the faint gold glow pulsing deep within its chest. Eleanor spotted Dr. Finch waving his arms, trying to command order. "The elders started too soon," he shouted over the din. "The bell isn't meant to toll until midnight. Someone tell the children to wait. We haven't finished the apple bobbing." Eleanor pushed through the restless crowd. Arguments crackled around her, not about the ritual, but about ancient slights. Neighbours hissed about borrowed ladders never returned, about dogs that barked too long, about a parish fête 2 summers ago when the wrong jam had taken first prize. The Scarecrow was stirring it, feeding on their grudges, drawing them out like poison through skin. "Dr. Finch!" she shouted, reaching him. "You have to stop them. The ritual's corrupted. The charm inside the Scarecrow's overloaded. If they burn it, they'll release everything it's holding." He blinked, baffled. "Eleanor, please, it's folklore. We've done this for centuries. The accidents today are just nerves, bad luck, and slippery stones." He gestured to the crowd with a helpless laugh. "They're just excited for the fire." But the villagers were already moving with a grim, trance-like purpose. A group of young men carried torches toward the pile, their faces gleaming with anticipation. Eleanor realized she couldn't reason with them. She'd have to work alone. She needed a tool, something sharp enough to cut through straw, rope, and superstition, and she knew where to find one. She broke away from the square and ran for the side door of the Handley Arms. The pub was empty, its benches overturned, the floor littered with tankards left mid-drink. She slipped into the kitchen, where the metallic gleam of knives lined the counter like waiting instruments. The air smelled of fryer oil and damp stone. Her eyes settled on a long, curved carving knife, the butcher's kind, heavy in the hand and wickedly sharp. She picked it up and froze. Her fear struck like an echo. Not fear of the Scarecrow, but of herself. The blade shimmered in the candlelight, and for a moment she saw it flash through a different memory. London. The emergency ward. The patient she'd lost. The imagined slip of a scalpel. The vein opened in error. The collapse she couldn't reverse. The fear of failure, of making one fatal cut too many. Her breathing hitched, but she forced her hands steady. "This isn't a mistake," she whispered. "This is saving lives." She tucked the knife inside her coat and stepped back into the street. The fog was thicker now, alive with whispers. Somewhere in the distance, the bell gave another erratic toll, the iron sound bending as though it too were afraid. Back at the green, the crowd had grown. Flames licked at the damp wood, reluctant but rising. Eleanor ran straight for the base of the scarecrow. "Wait!" she shouted. "The wood's too wet. You'll waste the fire you need to wait for the elder." The distraction fell flat. The villagers, already half enchanted, ignored her. She pushed through them and found Mr. Graves, the butcher, standing guard near the effigy. His bandaged arm hung at his side, his face drawn and strange. "You shouldn't be here, nurse," he said softly. "This is our cleansing. We've got to burn him. We've always hated him." "Hated him?" "Not him," Mr. Graves murmured, his gaze distant. "Each other. But we couldn't show it. We needed somewhere to put it, so we gave it to the straw man. Now he's full. Let him burn." She understood then this was no exorcism to them. It was therapy. The burning wasn't meant to save them. It was meant to end them. She climbed onto the platform before anyone could stop her. The wood was hot and slick beneath her boots. She could see the faint golden pulse deep in the scarecrow's chest, the binding knot still active. The knife glinted in her hand. She raised it high. "Stop." The voice struck inside her skull rather than her ears, a dry whisper threaded with the sound of turning earth. "The vessel is sealed. The grudge is mine." The scarecrow's pumpkin head tilted, the light in its eyes flaring white. Around its base the earth began to seep black water, thick and oily. The smell of decay rose from it, rot, waste, infection, a perversion of her own greatest fear. Eleanor slipped, catching herself against the frame. Her hands came away slick and cold. The villagers behind her cheered as the flames took hold. "No!" she gasped, lunging again at the straw chest. The knife sank deep this time. The straw hissed. For a heartbeat the world went still. Then the golden light exploded. A shockwave of energy flung her backward from the platform. She hit the cobbles hard, the breath crushed out of her lungs. When she opened her eyes, the cheering had stopped. The fire raged high, painting the fog red. The villagers stood frozen, eyes vacant, and from the other side of the square a new figure stepped into view. The Sixpenny Scarecrow. Chapter 4. The Unmasking. Eleanor lay sprawled on the slick cobblestones, her ears ringing, the taste of rust and smoke in her mouth. The bonfire roared behind her, and through its light she saw the figure emerging from the haze. Marcus. Or what had once been Marcus. He wore a long, dark coat that looked centuries out of place, and when he spoke, his voice no longer belonged to the man she remembered. It carried a weight older than the village, a tone that felt like earth shifting under pressure. "The physician is clumsy," the entity said through Marcus's lips. "You tamper with forces you cannot diagnose. You should have stayed in the city, where the stones are too young to remember their names." Eleanor pushed herself upright, gripping the butcher's knife as though it were a lifeline. "You shouldn't even exist," she said, her voice trembling. "You were sealed in Tintagel, in the vaults." "I am wherever the land rots with debt," the entity replied, its eyes dark as oil. "The Cornish stones fed on the pride of kings, but these Dorset fields, they've been soaking up the hatred of peasants for centuries, a far richer harvest." He gestured toward the blazing scarecrow. The carved pumpkin head stared down on them like a god caught mid-laughter. Deep in its chest, the binding knot pulsed with golden light, stronger than before. "You're Old Man Barley," the entity said, almost with admiration. "An exquisite device, a vessel of collective spite. When you burn him without the proper counterrite, you don't cleanse the hate, you amplify it. A perfect broadcast beacon." I followed the signal. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. "You're going to feed on it?" "Not feed," Marcus said, or rather, the thing inside him did. "I will crown myself with it. Once this energy is released, I will bind it to me, become the king of their grievances. Their bitterness will be my law." The crowd behind him stirred the villagers, once stunned, now murmuring and shifting in agitation. Arguments reignited, old resentments flaring like embers in the air. Eleanor shouted over the noise. "You talk about debts, what about the one you owe the guide you killed at Tintagel?" For the first time, the entity hesitated. Marcus's head tilted, as though a memory had briefly pierced the surface. Then he smiled cold, humanless. "The guide was an accident, but you are my unfinished work, the healer who failed. I came here to finish you." The ground trembled. The scarecrow groaned, its frame bending as if under a great weight. The air grew charged, humming with the fury of centuries of suppressed anger. Around the square, the villagers began to shout, but not in fear. Dr. Finch grabbed the blacksmith by the collar. "You always thought you were better than me, always." Mrs. Henderson shrieked at Mr. Davies, her voice shrill and cracking. "You called my fudge dry, you humiliated me." All at once, the square dissolved into chaos. People shoved, swung, and screamed, a violent tide of everyday spite set free. Eleanor realized the truth. The entity had triggered the discharge before the charm could burn. The hate of the entire village was loose, raw, and uncontained, and Marcus was feeding from it, his body shuddering with every burst of rage. She had to reach the pub. The salt water in its brewing cellar, the ancient spring, was the only known counteragent. If she could lure the entity there, she might end it. She ran through the fighting crowd, ducking past swinging fists and flying debris. Someone hurled a torch. It hit the cobbles near her feet, bursting in a hiss of sparks. She reached the Handley Arms, its door hanging open, the interior dark. She rushed down into the cellar, the damp air closing around her. The smell of yeast and wet stone filled her lungs. In the centre of the floor was the well, the old brewing spring. The water shimmered faintly, reflecting the flicker of the firelight from above. She knelt beside it, gripping the butcher's knife, whispering to herself, "The charm must be submerged at midnight." A voice echoed from the stairs. "I expected you here, Eleanor." Marcus stood framed in the doorway, his shadow stretching across the stone. He was holding his camera, the one from Tintagel, and its red light blinked softly. "You won't win this time," she said, raising the knife. He descended a few steps, his movements smooth and deliberate. "You can't kill me. You fear mistakes too much. You're a healer bound by your own fear of harm. And I," he smiled thinly, "am the sum of every mistake this village ever made." The bell above them began to toll slower now, steady, like the heartbeat of something ancient. 10 strikes to midnight. Marcus lifted the camera, focusing it on her. "Smile, Eleanor. The camera must bear witness to the coronation of a new king." The knife trembled in her hand. She didn't aim for him. Instead, she seized the heavy wooden bucket beside the well, swung it hard, and let it drop into the spring. The splash echoed through the cellar. Marcus's composure cracked. "A desperate act," he hissed. "Too late." He lunged, wrenching the knife from her grasp, pressing her against the wall. His breath was ice on her cheek. "You failed your patient. Now you'll fail them all." Above, the bell tolled its final note. Dong. Midnight. The charm was still in the scarecrow. The ritual incomplete. The power uncontained. Marcus smiled, triumphant. "The binding is mine." And then he stumbled. His foot caught the rope that held the bucket. The rope snapped taut, jerking the bucket from the well. It hit the floor, sloshing out dark, briny water. The smell of salt filled the room. Marcus recoiled, his face twisting. "No, no, not this again." At that moment, a heavy tread echoed behind him. Mr. Graves, the butcher, stumbled down the steps, still half crazed from the psychic riot above. The carving knife was clutched in his good hand, the blade glinting with straw residue. His eyes fixed on the bucket, not on them. "This blasted water," he snarled. "Always too cold. Spoils the ale." Before Eleanor could shout, he swung the knife down in a single furious arc. The blade pierced the bucket. The residue on the steel met the salt water. Light exploded, blinding, pure, and absolute. Marcus screamed a sound so deep it rattled the stone walls. Then silence. When Eleanor opened her eyes, Marcus's body lay crumpled on the steps, steam curling from his coat. Mr. Graves stood frozen, the knife embedded in the shattered bucket. The spring water foamed white, then went still. The entity was gone. But Eleanor knew the hate it had stirred wasn't. It lingered quiet now, waiting for the next vessel strong enough to hold it. The Sixpenny Scarecrow, Chapter 5. Midnight Grudges. The flash of light from the cellar was followed by a silence so deep it felt physical, as though the air itself had forgotten how to breathe. Eleanor stood blinking in the pale smoke, her ears ringing, her vision swimming with after-images of gold and white. Marcus lay motionless on the steps, the antique coat scorched and wet. The red light on his camera had gone dark. Mr. Graves stood nearby, still gripping the butcher's knife, the blade sunk deep into the broken bucket. The spring water frothed and steamed around it, releasing a smell of salt and burnt iron. Eleanor crouched beside Marcus, fingers trembling as she found his pulse faint but steady. The will of the stone was gone, torn free by the salt in the steel. What remained was only a man hollowed, breathing but unreachable. She turned to Mr. Graves. His eyes were glazed, his voice cracked. "I hate his ale," he muttered softly. "Always did." That was all he said. The fight had gone out of him. The whole village, she realized, would be like this, exhausted and ashamed. Eleanor pulled the knife free from the bucket, wiped the handle clean on her sleeve, and climbed the cellar steps. Outside, the night was chaos. The bonfire had burned itself into a tower of gold and cinders. Sparks wheeled high into the fog, carried on a restless wind. The villagers were no longer cheering. They were fighting properly, fighting now, faces twisted, voices raw, fists rising and falling in the firelight. Dr. Finch wrestled with the blacksmith over an ancient boundary fence. Mrs. Henderson hurled her walking stick through Mr. Davies's bakery cart, shouting about fudge and lies. The air pulsed with anger, not supernatural any longer, but heartbreakingly human. Eleanor ran to the base of the scarecrow. Old Man Barley loomed half-burned, his head still glowing, his chest still alive with a thin, stubborn shimmer of gold. The binding knot had survived the blast pierced, but not destroyed. The heat from the fire bittered her face as she clambered up the charred frame. The straw crackled beneath her boots, and the air stank of smoke and scorched grain. She lifted the knife, found the glow, and drove the blade in deep. The sound was a long, low groan, like the earth itself exhaling. The straw shifted beneath her hand, alive with whispering voices. Hundreds of them, all whispering the same word, mine. She cut deeper. The knife struck something small and hard. She pulled it free, a bundle of dried corn husks and knotted twine, bound tight, pulsing faintly gold, the heart of the charm. She sawed through the final cord. The twine snapped. A burst of light flared, brief, blinding, and then everything fell still. The whispers stopped. Eleanor jumped down, clutching the now dark charm. The villagers had fallen silent. They blinked, confused, staring at one another through the haze. The bonfire hissed, shrinking. Without hesitation, she turned and ran back to the cellar. Marcus was still unconscious on the steps. Mr. Graves had slumped beside him, muttering quietly to no one. Eleanor tossed the charm into the spring. The water boiled black for a heartbeat, then cleared perfectly still, perfectly silent. It was finished. The next morning, the village of Sixpenny Handley woke to an uneasy peace. Smoke drifted from the ashes of the bonfire. The scarecrow was a skeleton of charred timber. The air smelled of soot and rain. At the surgery, Eleanor and Dr. Finch tended to cuts, bruises, and the occasional black eye. No one spoke of what had happened. They just stared at the floor, or at their hands, or out of the window toward the crossroads. "I can't explain it," Finch said at last, dabbing at a split lip. "Mass hysteria, perhaps. The strain of the holiday." Eleanor said nothing. She looked at the villagers, tired, ashamed, but alive. The external malice was gone, yet something quieter remained. Knowledge, memory. Each person had seen their own worst self laid bare. Marcus had been taken to a hospital in Salisbury alive, unresponsive, a hollow man. The will of the stone was gone, neutralized by the old salt spring, but she doubted it was truly dead. Hate rarely dies. It waits. That afternoon, Elder McCrae arrived at the surgery. He looked frail but calm, his cane tapping gently on the floor. "You've saved us, Nurse Vance," he said, bowing his head. The old writings warned, "The strongest power is not in the gods we praise, but in the grudges we keep. You severed the knot. The village will heal." Eleanor met his eyes. "The knot's gone, Elder, but the grudges, they're still here." McCrae smiled thinly. "That is the human condition, my dear. It's what keeps the world turning, for better or worse." He left her with a small, leather-bound book. Eleanor turned it over in her hands. On the cover, written in careful ink, were the words "Harvest Prayers." Later, alone in the surgery, she opened it. It wasn't a book of prayers. It was a ledger, page after page of grievances, written in McCrae's own hand. Every quarrel, every insult, every rumour since 1953 catalogued, dated and signed. And on the final page, a note dated that very morning. "The true power, Nurse Vance, lies not in collecting hate, but in managing it. We never burned the scarecrow because it was full. We kept it because it was useful. Fear kept the peace. Order through unease. You have freed them, and now they are free to hate in the open." Eleanor read the words twice. Then she closed the book. Outside, the villagers were already arguing again. Small things, trivial things about whose fence had burned, whose washing line was gone, whose turn it was to fix the bell rope. She looked down at the leather cover, her fingers trembling slightly. She had saved them from an ancient evil, only to return them to their own. The bonfire smoke drifted past the window, thin and grey. Somewhere in the distance, a single crow called. It sent a shiver down her spine. Eleanor shut the book and whispered, almost to herself, "Another clean hand, another knot. It never ends."
This was The Sixpenny Scarecrow by Coops.
I hope you enjoyed my short story. Thank you for listening to The Sixpenny Scarecrow, a story of fear, folklore, and the grudges we never quite let go. If you enjoyed tonight's tale, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. New audiobooks appear every week, each one written and narrated to bring a little light to the dark corners of Old England. Tap the bell so you never miss a midnight premiere. And share the story if it lingered with you longer than you expected. Thank you again for listening. From me, Coops. Until next time, sleep well.